Hello and welcome to the Desi Buzz Talk Show. I'm your host, Dr. Shabana Parvez, founder of Arlington Innovative Medical Center. I have with me Farzana Baduel. She's joining me from London today. She is the president-elect for the Chartered Institute of Public Relations and the CEO and co-founder of Curzon PR, which is an award-winning strategic communications firm and a global strategy and communications support partner for many government, developmental, and corporate entities in the quest to build a better world. She's also the resident public relations expert for the University of Oxford Entrepreneurship Center at Said Business School. She is a chartered PR practitioner, and she's been awarded honorary fellowship with the Chartered Institute of Public Relationships and is also a fellow. Farzana has her own podcast called Fuse, where she interviews leading experts in communications, and she's won multiple awards in PR, leadership, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Welcome, Farzana. Lovely to have you with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And what an incredible introduction. I feel almost a blush if I wasn't brown skinned.
Well, it's well worth it. Let's talk. Let's start off talking about your president-elect. You're the president-elect for the Chartered Institute of Public Relations for 2025. So, can you tell us what this role means to you and how you envision shaping the future of public relations through this platform?
I feel incredibly honored for the role because I actually entered into the realm of public relations 15 years ago. And
Wow.
I came from an accounting background and with a short stint in politics. So I didn't actually know anything about public relations. And I always felt sort of having this massive imposter syndrome on my shoulders. And so to then segue from having imposter syndrome to then actually being the president of the Chartered Institute of Public Relations is a huge journey for me. And I'm incredibly grateful. And for me, it's really about representation as well. I'll be the first Muslim ever to be the president for the Chartered Institute, and it
Mhm.
is a sector that is woefully underrepresented in terms of ethnic minorities in the UK, and I'm imagining, I assume so in the US as well. So,
Yeah.
it's a very special position for me to take on.
Hmm. That's so you're kind of pioneering in that role, and I expect that that's going to. We'll talk a little bit more about like what your plans are in this platform for furthering that visibility, I guess, and the honoring of Muslims and South Asians in these roles. What inspired you to co-found Curzon PR? And how has your journey been as a leader in that strategic communications industry?
Well, I ran a tax company for 10 years and then I didn't quite know what I wanted to do. And so I joined a political party. And that's when I sort of stumbled
Hmm.
across this world of public relations and perceptions. And I found it so fascinating how a perception crafted well can actually lead to a new reality. And I thought it
Mhm.
was almost like magic. I thought this is incredible, this intangible world. You can't see it,
Mhm.
but it's so consequential. And so I was really drawn to it by curiosity. And somebody once said to me, in life, you must follow your enthusiasm. And I
Mhm.
really had this incredible pull towards this industry that I knew nothing really about. I only knew one person that was in that industry. And I asked that one person, would you set up a PR firm with me? And that was exactly 15 years ago. And it's been an incredible long journey, but it's a wonderful industry because it's really a confluence of multiple disciplines, each of which I find very interesting, from psychology to behavioral science to advocacy, media, marketing. It's a really interesting nexus and very sort of important in today's age as we're combating societal ills such as disinformation and misinformation. So it feels very
Yes.
purposeful as well. In itself, it's really interesting.
And although you say you're relatively new to this, you have uh, won many awards in public relationships, leadership, entrepreneurships. So, what do you think, in terms of your values or qualities in you, that would have contributed to your success? Contributed most to your success in this field.
I think when you approach anything in life that where you have a slight insecurity, where you have imposter syndrome, it actually can be a bit of a superpower because then it drives you to always learning, to always
Hmm.
preparing that bit extra than other people in order to achieve what you're setting out to achieve. So, in a funny sort of way, I'd say insecurity can drive you to just do go that extra mile, and that in itself can then position you for success.
That's actually a very actually inspiring advice for those who kind of feel, you know, imposter syndrome. It's very common. It's common in my field. It's common in pretty much every field. That's really good advice that can actually spur you on. So now, talking about Curzon PR, your firm, it does support governments in terms of strategy and communication support, but then again, other organizations worldwide. And you, like you said, it is this nexus of, developmental organizations, governments, corporations. So these are quite different sectors and markets. How do you tailor your approach for each of those? Yeah. How do you tailor your approach for your clients, I guess?
Well, 15 years ago, I didn't know anything about public relations. So when I set up the agency with my co-founder, we were sector agnostic because we thought actually, because I'm hyper curious, I'm actually interested in everything. And so it's
Mhm.
really hard when you're hyper curious to sort of create these boundaries, because I find everything interesting and everyone interesting. And I'm very open in terms of the personality spectrum. And so we ended up just waiting to see what would come to us, and and we did this for about 10 years until we then sat down and thought, right, it's increasingly important for us to specialize and not be a jack of all trades.
Mm.
And what we did is we just analyzed all the different organizations that we've worked with over the last decade, and which ones did we rank high in terms of sentiment, in terms of team sentiment, as well as client sentiment, as well as profitability, and where our best work. And we realized it was in these three segments. It was government, international development, and also corporate. And that's where we ended up focusing our efforts on. And we weren't very good on consumer. And
Mhm.
so we decided to therefore drop it and just focus on these three areas, but with a very sort of strong purpose of connecting worlds, and a strong a thread that sort of weaves across it, which is really working across the global terrain, across cultures.
Yes, and leading on from that, you said these sectors that, like, you're emphasizing your firm has a passion for building a better world. Like, as you said, working with governments and organizations that do development. Is there a particular campaign or project that you think has made a significant positive impact that you can maybe share with us?
We're actually very fortunate because there's been so many projects that we have had that we've been trusted by our client partners to work with. But one in particular, I think that strikes me, is we were working for this incredible plastic surgeon called Mohammed Javad. And he's British Pakistani, and he would work on cosmetic surgery for the great and the good in his Harley Street practice. And during his annual leave, his time off, he would go to Pakistan, South America, other countries, and really help rebuild for free the faces of women who've had acid thrown in their face. And so that actually attracted the attention of a documentary maker, and the documentary Saving Face ended up winning an Oscar, and we represented the protagonist, Dr. Mohammed Javad, and it was very purposeful because not only did the awareness of the work that he does raised much needed funds for acid burn charities, but it also led to legislative change in Pakistan that really did punish the perpetrators of such attacks. So that was particularly meaningful,
Yeah.
and I think, yeah, we were very honored to work on that campaign.
That is a big, outstanding achievement, and to have made that impact on the lives of, that we're increasing the awareness and have the impact on the lives of those women, and in future, hopefully preventing such issues. Yeah, that's where work really makes a big impact. Beautiful story. So again, you're talking about different cultures. Cross-cultural communication is again one of the special uh, fields that you're interested in your firm. So, as you mentioned, and as the world is increasingly globalized, what advice would you give to organizations that are navigating these cross-cultural challenges? Because we are getting more and more connected in the world. It's just getting smaller, really.
I think, first of all, to be aware that the way that we think is shifting because of the way that we receive information. So if
Mhm.
you look at social media, it creates these algorithms that really shape these echo chambers. So you end up quite quickly being surrounded by people who think like you, talk like you, walk like you, and that can be quite polarizing because then you develop an intolerance to alternative perspectives,
Mhm.
and then you end up having a very sort of warped idea of reality. And I think that can be quite dangerous. And so, what I try and advocate is for people to really go outside of their bubble, to understand that social media is creating this sort of this bubble around you that will prevent you from really connecting with people. And I think in this world of polarization and hyperpartisanship, it's so important for us to really proactively make an effort to befriend and listen and really actively listen, because that's actually a skill set that's in rare supply, to
Mhm.
alternative perspectives, and to really look at the margins of society as well, to those people that you wouldn't really want to listen to, and force yourself in that uncomfortable position of just really seeing and listening and understanding. And I think it's just that age old wisdom where you really should listen and think before you speak as well, because I think also the other issue about social media is that it's very reactive, and a lot of people have lost opportunities, be it jobs or friends, just through sort of an emotional response on social media because of the immediacy nature of it. So just be very careful about your digital footprint, and be careful about how these algorithms are shaping our mind and creating polarization and really fragmenting society.
Definitely food for thought with especially with social media now. Yeah. So you also, let's talk a little bit about the Asian Communications Network. You also co-founded the Asian Communications Network because you wanted to empower other British Asians in the communications field. So, how is this change? How is the Asian Communication Network driving this change in, representation in media and communications? Why do you feel that's critical? I guess you partly answered that in your previous response, but.
Yes, it all happened. I have two friends of mine, and we were talking for a long time to set up an Asian communications network, because actually it's really hard to find people who have a similar cultural background in our sectors. And
Mm.
sometimes you just want that sense of community around you. It's so empowering. And so what we did is we did absolutely nothing for 2 years. And then all of a sudden, in August, we had the race riots here in the UK, where we had these horrific images in the media, and it was videos and images of ethnic minorities, Muslims, Afro-Caribbean, British Asians, migrants who were being attacked, physically attacked, and it was so awful. And what also was very apparent to us was, in the lead up to this, there was very dangerous rhetoric, divisive rhetoric from politicians as well as from the media, a lot of Islamophobia, anti-migrant sentiment. And what we realized was actually the lack of representation in media, in marketing, in PR, it actually results in people like us aren't in the newsroom, aren't the ones who are sort of saying, well, actually that's quite biased and that's actually quite divisive, that rhetoric. And you're bringing in these sort of stereotypes and archetypes that are incredibly harmful and
Mhm.
really not accurate either. And so what we realize is that there needs to be more of us. There needs to be a level playing field, that we are represented in the decision making, in the world of media, to ensure that we keep a check on the harmful narratives, because we're the ones who are most likely to speak up, to understand that there is something wrong,
Mhm.
and to really try and build a much more cohesive society through communications, which can be done at the first step through diversity, through representation, and then
Mhm.
secondly inclusion, to ensure that we support the career so that they reach senior levels. Because whilst we're not represented in terms of numbers, also from seniority levels, they are just not there in terms of the decision making positions.
Mhm. So, as you mentioned, stereotypes. You also are a trustee of the British Asian Trust and the Soho Theatre. So, tell us a little bit about how, not just in the media and communications, but storytelling through these methods, like through theater, how do you see that as a tool to tackle the stereotypes and to help foster understanding?
Well, Soho Theatre, they work across comedy and cabaret and theatre. And it's actually a really fascinating organization. They have a big focus actually on South Asia. And what
Mhm.
I learned through my participation with Soho Theatre is that comedy is really at the front line of tolerance. And this council culture that we are operating in is also harming the arts, where where the performers are finding it difficult increasingly to find what the respectable parameters are of their jokes. And
Mm.
so it's actually really interesting, and it's quite interesting for me because actually comedians are the arch communicators, because comedians have the ability to elicit an emotional response from their audience. And so from a PR perspective, I really analyze them. I analyze their tempo, their facial expressions, their body language, and the tone of their voice, not only the content in terms of their jokes, because it is really quite magical to have an audience in front of you, whether it's through theatre or through comedy, and be able to move them emotionally across a journey. And so they really are the masters of communicators, in my opinion. And also, I'm very passionate about the arts, again, for a lot of British Asians, because we are often the children of economic immigrants that came over to the UK, where the arts really wasn't an area for us to embrace. It
Right.
was, it was very sort of like immigrant work ethic, study, 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 work,
Mhm.
work, work,
Right.
and in very safe environments as well in the professions. And so it's a new area, the arts, for us as sort of second, third generation to really embrace and bring that sort of work-life balance into our lives, and to embrace the arts and how it can enrich us as well.
Mhm. So, what about storytelling in as you're in your role in Oxford at the Said Business School? Because you're also the PR expert there. So, do you use this comedy examples, for example, to mentor entrepreneurs or leaders? And how do you encourage those at Oxford, for example, to use storytelling effectively in whatever ventures they're doing in
Well,
PR?
one of the areas that we do a lot of work on is really helping startups, founders, to hone their storytelling, because actually communication is so critical at that point, because the trajectory is that they either raise finance and they can then ride the wave of finance and grow their business, or they don't, and their startup becomes just an idea that never got off to the ground. And so what we try and do is work with the startup founders in terms of their founder story, because it's the
Hmm.
founder story that the investors will make the decision on whether to really invest with them or not, because often these founders and the startups don't have a track record. So the whole emphasis on, on them winning the money or not, which is really binary, is their story.
Right.
And how,
It's really
and
the
because
emotion that they can get from telling their founder story. They have to use that same emotional pull in order to get people to
yeah,
invest because they have no other background or history to go on. Yeah. So you
exactly.
also help them
And
perfect their elevator pitch and their founder story to communicate
yeah.
effectively.
Yeah,
Wow.
because you have a lot of investors and, they're going to listen to, I don't know, 50, 100 pitches a month. And how is yours going to cut through the clutter? How's yours going to resonate with them? And,
Mhm.
and often, if you do get in front of them, how are you going to convince them? Because sometimes you have people who are great communicators that win a lot of investment, but their
Mhm.
ideas aren't necessarily solid. And you have
Right.
others who actually have got a solid business idea, but they don't have the communication skills. And you
Uh,
see this in politics. You have great communicators, but not necessarily, good characters who've got strong
right.
leadership qualities. And they become leaders all of a sudden because they are just so adept at communicating. So it's really, a skill set that I believe everybody should learn in their walk of life. And it does, I think, level the playing field in terms of for talent, because what happens is people without talent can sometimes get to the top because of their communication skills, and
Right.
those with talent actually end up left behind.
This is very, very true. Very point to ponder on. So, in your podcast, you explore ideas and communication. Your podcast named Fuse, right? You explore innovative ideas and communications. During that podcast, can you tell me like any one particular conversation or insight that stayed with you or that stands out to you from that?
Yes, there was actually this one podcast interview that I've just done recently with a gentleman called Yasser Khan, and he is based in Canada. And he talked about how he was incredibly shy and he couldn't publicly speak because, as a child, he was told that he had sort of buck teeth by a cruel girl in his class, and he overcame that sort of insecurity, and he ended up becoming a speaking coach to multinational CEOs. And he is on Instagram, he's on TikTok, and I, would really say for those people, do find him because he gives bite-sized communication tips on how to communicate. And I thought actually that was a really great story, really resonated with me, somebody that didn't study communications, that didn't have the chops to enter the industry, but yet through sheer passion and perseverance ended up learning a lot about it and passionate about teaching others as well.
That's a great story. And again, another example of how, no matter where you start from, you can get to the top, or you can go as far as you want to go. If put the work into it, you're passionate about it, willing to learn. That's incredible. So what about now? AI is in everything. So how do you see AI and digital platforms? How are they going to change the PR landscape with, how AI is transforming technology, communications, and everything we do now?
Before there used to be a there used to be a barrier to creating content, which was based upon cost. You had to pay for the graphic designer, the video equipment, the video editing, the storytelling strategist, copywriter, and so forth. And now with all these AI-driven tools, the good news is you don't have those barriers, those cost barriers. But also on the flips, so everyone can become a publisher, and everyone's narrative can really be sort of fed into these global platforms. However, I think the downside is that it's all about intent. And if you have good intent, great. Charities can use AI driven tools in order to further their cause. But also on the flip side, you also have the dark side. So you have hostile actors and states that are looking to undermine societies through disinformation. And you've got a lot of sort of deep fakes. You've got people who can take images of
Mhm.
yours and create a video that your loved ones will think it's you, but it isn't you. And so I think that what people should really be focused on in terms of schools and our communities is to build media literacy,
Mm.
because the AI tools that are coming in, it means that we are more prone to being scammed. We are more prone to having our emotions and our logic hacked through this AI-driven content. And I think that it means that we need to all up our game in terms of media literacy, understanding about verified content, being able to
Mhm.
to spot um, content that is harmful. And I think that we should start that from a very young age, and ensure that that it is really inbuilt throughout the whole all the generations in the community, because you are seeing a massive spike in scams and a massive spike in the lack of social cohesion as well.
Yeah, so as we talked about the scams, what do you say, what role does ethics play in strategic communications? Especially like you said, at this time, there's so much misinformation, there's polarization. So how do you see the role of ethics and how we can maybe implement that better in the, communications industry?
I think to raise awareness that every single person with a smartphone has a responsibility. So before you retweet or you reshare an article, you've got to really think to yourself: are you sure that the article is true? Is it from a verified source? Because if you start retweeting, sharing, or even sharing it on WhatsApp, you're part of the problem. And I think we
Hmm.
need to understand that we have responsibility, and that's the first awareness that we need to develop. And then the second is to really use the responsibility wisely by being literate about the tools that are out there. And you see, obviously, in the run up to elections in particular, the spread of disinformation and misinformation. And that is only spread because of individuals like us. So we can't blame others all the time. We have to also take responsibility and be really mindful, and also teach our children and the younger generations who are particularly susceptible, because they don't understand what is, the sort of the technology that's behind it. And it's only going to get more and more sort of convincing and compelling. And
Hmm.
so I just go back to the importance of individual responsibility and collective action for literacy and awareness of what these tools are creating, so that we can protect our society and our individuals.
Yes, I think there is a social media code of ethics that's been proposed or circulated, but different organizations. Um, and it'd be nice if one of my interviewees had mentioned that specifically as well. And we're just hoping that more and more organizations, or like everybody, really could distribute and read this and sign on to this, almost like an honor code.
Yeah,
It would
we
make
do have that. Like for the Chartered Institute of Public Relations, we have a CPD, like a continual professional development. And within there, there is a mandatory obligation to have CPD points around ethics. And the
Mhm,
Chartered Institute of Public Relations have had that for quite a number of years, because actually we've realized that ethics is a key component of communications in the age of AI. And but I think that not everybody who tweets and publishes content is a professional, because you don't have to be now because of all of the tools that are available. So we really need that sort of awareness, that collective
mhm,
responsibility. And just like in schools, they had that sort of awareness of the environment and not to litter the streets and so forth. We need that same sort of literacy in our schools, so that they are prepared for what the future holds.
exactly. What about, is there a book that you think every public relations practitioner should read? Just like a quick
Gosh, I mean,
list.
there are so many. There's actually, I just interviewed Charles Duhigg, who
Mhm.
is an American writer, for my Fuse PRCA podcast, and
Yeah.
he's written actually three really good books. The first one is on habits,
Mhm,
and it's about how habits are sort of formed in terms of cue, routine, and reward, and it
mhm,
really talks about the sort of the neuroscience behind human
mhm.
behavior. And I'd say that his third book, Super Communicators, is also a very good book. But my God, there are such good books. I still
Yeah,
love the classics, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, which
that's
really is, it's about generosity of spirit. It's about you're
class.
not the hero of the story. Let them be the hero of the story. Tune into them and listen to them and actively listen. Because most of the time when we are in conversation with someone, when they're talking, we're not really listening. We're just
We're
thinking in our head,
supporting
what should we say
ourselves.
next?
Yes, this is where a
But
lot of miscommunication happens. Yeah.
yeah,
Listen
and
more than you
how
speak. And
Exactly. And, and it took me quite a while to get my head around the active art of listening. And once I developed it, my life
mm,
became so much richer, because everyone around you, they're all teachers, whether they're conscious or unconscious. They're walking books.
mm,
And if you just tune in, you can really glean wisdom and insight.
yeah, that's your good advice. And like you said, one of the most memorable campaigns you've worked on was the one where you helped the doctor who helped the women who had the acid burns. Um, any other memorable campaigns that you can think of that
Oh,
can share?
well, I would say, another campaign that we were very fortunate to work on, which was actually just very interesting, was that we worked for a few years on space tech. So all of a
Oh.
sudden, we did this incredible campaign with SpaceX and with
Mhm.
a incredible digital artist called Rafiq Anadol, and it was with this incredible creative studio, and it was just the intersection of taking the data from a space exploration program and putting it through digital art in order to make space tech more accessible through art, so that it's not just for the engineering minded. And then
That's
that led us
fascinating.
on to working for other space tech clients who would create these satellites and put them into space, and then just learning how all that data has an impact upon agricultural yields, and not only that, but also communication. And it opened up our whole world to space tech, and
Mhm.
how fascinating it is as it's kind of moving from sort of government control to the private sector, and how it's unleashing all sorts of applications. So space I find really interesting. And then it gives rise to governance, who owns space, and it's the new scramble for space,
Right. Yeah.
and and the sort of geopolitical underpinnings, and resources. Yeah,
Yeah,
fascinating.
a lot in that mix. Uh, what motivates you every day to excel in your field? What is like the secret to your secret sauce to your success?
I would say that I value growth. For me, I feel that what makes me really excited is never mastering my
Mhm.
profession, to always be on a back foot, because public relations has these tectonic plates underneath them with the behavioral science, the technology, the neuroscience, and all the shifts that are happening in the world. And because of that constant shift underneath our feet, we will never master our profession. We will always be eternal students. And
Mhm.
that is why I am, deeply in awe of the profession of public relations because you're just, I'm just working in a classroom.
Hmm. So as a physician now, the other aspect that I would like to ask you is like, how do you keep your balance in terms of your health, your focus, your productivity? How do you, you know, keep yourself going in that way?
But having been in the industry for 15 years, I'd say that the first 10 years I didn't have a balance, and it led to being a bit miserable and not and not doing my best work, ironically. And it was just because I've just got this ingrained immigrant hard work ethic that came from both my parents, who are both entrepreneurs and both incredibly hardworking. And it took a really long time to just kind of delayer all the influences, because I think, I mean, I'm in my late 40s, and I think that a lot of my 20s and 30s were really not being conscious of the influences on me and just like a computer program just running. And I think it was only when I hit my 40s when I started thinking, hold on, am I just the accumulation of influences that I happen to be picking up through osmosis? Or can I consciously decide who I want to be and how I want to live my life? And I think that sort of deep sort of
That's a good
self-awareness came in my 40s. And that's when I thought, well, you know what? I don't want to be dragged through life through the need for external validation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to chase vanity metrics. I want to really think deeply about what's important to me.
Hmm.
And I don't want to be driven by an insecurity of winning awards, and which was, I think, probably what was driving me in my 30s and my 20s, was just getting that external validation, and really understanding that actually I want internal validation, and self-love for me is the most important driver now.
This actually is perfect lead into my next two questions. And one is, given what you have been through and how your journey and your career has shaped, and as we talked about, even its impact on you personally, or even physically, mentally, what is the message that you would give to aspiring young PR professionals, people, South Asian PR professionals, or anybody aspiring to a career in public relations?
I would say that, embrace public relations, because I do think we're going through a golden era of our profession because of the fragmentation of communication channels, and we're pivoting from tactical to strategic work, which we never had access to before. So I would say that it's definitely a brilliant profession to go into. I would say to read widely around public relations, and I think, understand the disciplines that it rests on. So really embrace and learn about neuroscience, behavioral science, psychology. I think those are as important as the sort of tactical tools you'll learn in public relations. And also, I think, enjoy the journey. It's a fascinating career, and you're entering at the right time for the profession.
Yeah, so in closing, if you could, Farzana, if you could summarize your vision for the future of public relations and storytelling, if you could summarize it in one sentence, what would it be?
Gosh, that's
That's
really
putting you
hard.
on the spot.
In one sentence, I would say the future of public relations is to be at the vanguard of the disruption that is impacting our society through AI, and
Mhm.
be vigilant custodians of society by combating disinformation and misinformation, and being
Yeah.
actually a new pillar to democracy.
That's a very good summary. Thank you so much, Farzan. It's been a fascinating and really inspiring listening to your story and talking to you. And let's hope that we can inspire more people, especially South Asians, to go into this underrepresented industry, really. That you've been such a trailblazer and such an inspiration, and we hope more people can go in and, help ease the disinformation and help build bridges all throughout in every sector by communicating better. Communication is just so important. Thank you so much, and hopefully we'll see you sometime.